In the first part, we learned how modes are derived from a parent scale. Each mode is rooted on a degree of its parent scale. We also learned that each mode also builds an associated chord type, major chords for the major modes and minor chords for the minor modes. This creates a modal chord scale from which we can build modal chord progressions. We're now going to look at what makes a chord progression suitable for using a given mode. For example, what makes a chord progression suitable for playing Lydian as a scale in a solo? Let's stick with that example for now. So we know that Lydian is a major mode and therefore it builds major chords using some or all of its tones. This Lydian chord will be known as our tonic chord. A tonic chord is often, but not always, the chord on which you begin and end a progression. A better way to think of it is the chord we can call home in our progression. The other chords we'll use are like the journey away from home. So to reinforce that Lydian mode as our tonic, we need to centre our chord progression around its related chord. For example, using the C major chord scale, this would mean our Lydian tonic chord is F major. If we just play F major and the Lydian mode together, we get an idea for how Lydian interacts with major chords. But if we want to enhance that relationship, we can use other chords within that same chord scale as our journey away from the F major tonic. An example would be F major, G major, E minor. Using the G major and E minor chords around the F major chord reinforces F major as the tonic chord and therefore reinforces Lydian as the tonal centre of the progression. This is where you have to use your ears more discerningly because not every combination will work towards reinforcing a modal key centre. Phrygian, for example, is an awkward one because it never really sounds resolved enough to be used as a tonic chord. Locrian is another ambiguous mode to use as a tonic because the diminished chord it builds feels naturally unresolved and is therefore used more commonly as a tension chord before resolving to a more stable chord within our scale. So there's quite a bit of experimenting to be done on your part in deciding which chord combinations best reinforce a particular modal flavour. The two most stable tonics to use are those of Ionian and Aeolian, the natural major and minor key centres. Aeolian, for example, has a few solid options for creating a chord progression around that mode. Here's one example: A minor, D minor, F major, G major. Or we could build a Dorian-based chord progression by centering the progression around Dorian's chord. In this example, as we're still using the C major chord scale, Dorian's tonic chord will be D minor. Even though the chords we're using in these progressions are all drawn from the tones of the parent scale, you need to use your best judgment when using the modes over chords away from the tonic chord. Not every tone within the given mode will sound perfectly compatible with every chord in the scale. Some tones are best used as passing tones, for example, which is explained in another video. The key thing here is that we're using this modal system and the chords it builds to reinforce a given modal flavour. Eventually, you'll come to know this as the Dorian sound or the Mixolydian sound, etc. You'll eventually get to the stage where you can hear a mode's character dominate the music. Of course, as mentioned previously, each mode can also be used over individual chords, so if a chord progression doesn't conform to this particular modal system, then you need to look at each chord individually and decide when or if any of these modes would work effectively. I hope this two-part series has provided a valuable introduction to modal theory. Please visit fretjam.com for more in-depth lessons on modes, and don't hesitate to ask any questions you have. Cheers.